Hello, and if you're hearing this, we are now on a new podcast feed. You can find us at cast@athis.org, although if you are one of our older subscribers, you should have just been forwarded over. So we wanted to say thank you to Misdirected Mark for hosting us for all these years. And you can also find new podcasts at cast.athis.org, where you'll find the One World Pod, Ashes of Athis podcast, as well as Mark Hope's Dark Sun to Tame a Land podcast. And with that, let's listen to the show. Welcome to Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, a Dark Sun podcast. I'm your host, Robert.
And I'm Jesse.
We're back with a look at some Dark Sun adventures. This is a good time for it, as Athis.org and AthisCon have recently released a variety of new adventures for your Dark Sun games.
That's right. AthisCon continues to provide excursions so you can satisfy your hunger for Dark Sun with one-shot adventures.
So let's get into the Dark Sun news. It's been a while since we recorded, and so there's a little bit. Firstly, there's a new resources menu on the website that now includes the timeline, the distance calculators, a magazine index, and then the new files section. Under the files section, there is now a ton of stuff. It's just a place where we can put, like miscellaneous files for like things like maps, VTT maps, overland maps, character sheets, handouts. We put up June Solar's City State of Uric supplement. We uploaded In Kalak's Shadow, which is an old AD&D adventure by Daniel Bandera, the Dark Sun fonts, and Mark Cope's excellent traveler's guides to the city-states and cities of Athis DM summaries.
Adam's been posting the old expanded random encounters, Athasian survey projects, Sands of Athis, and some NetZine articles, all of this on athis.org.
Posted a Mindscape Combat for Any Edition article a couple of months ago, so check that out.
Plus, this sort of renewed interest in Dark Sun, thanks to the push from athis.org to get out a new edition of material, and from AthisCon running regular events. We've got actual plays that are coming around as well now.
Blue Box RPG just started. I think they're on episode 3 now. They're on Twitch Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Pacific. If you're a Dark Sun fan, you definitely want to check it out. It's a great podcast, or not podcast, actual play. Like, I don't even usually listen to actual plays, but this one I can listen to. John is a great GM, and he has taken 3D files, like STL files, and imported them into Tailspire. So he's got some really cool 3D virtual tabletop stuff, that's always on the screen, so you can check that out. Custom Dark Sun stuff. So it's really cool. Although it's not really a Dark Sun campaign.
Right? It's actually a Greyhawk game.
Right, it's actually a Greyhawk.
Don't tell anyone in the Tablelands. The conceit is interesting. The Greyhawk setting has an ancient war between the Sulwas and the Baklunish that ended with a mutual Armageddon in the form of the rain of colorless fire and the invoked devastation. And this caused large swaths of the continent to get wiped out and precipitated various migrations, which is all part of the backstory of Greyhawk. Anyway, you've got this giant inland desert area that's really inaccessible. That's a result of one of these magical cataclysms. And they've just taken the Tablelands and plopped it right down there. And then part of the backstory says, oh, the atmosphere composition is different after the magic that happened here. And the people there have evolved to breathe this type of atmosphere. So you can't leave. You can't leave the Tablelands and go to the rest of Greyhawk, or you will die a horrible choking death, and vice versa. Unless someone gets a necklace of adaptation, I guess. In other news, Owen Edwards is running Dark Sun Mysteries of Athis, which you can also find a link to on the actual play. I need to check that one out.
Yeah, I think that's a second edition one as well.
Yeah, definitely my jam.
June Solar, we know, has run AthisCon, has started his AthisCon excursion weekends. He's done about 3 of them now, although he's kind of on a little bit of a hiatus since he's going to Origins and Gen Con and running a ton of Dark Sun there.
He is a busy Templar.
Yeah, he is.
Well, let's move on to our main topic. And this month, since we've got all these adventures that are coming out for Dark Sun, let's talk about what makes a Dark Sun adventure. What sets a Dark Sun adventure apart from other D&D adventures, and what are those sort of recurring motifs that showed up in the published adventures?
Yeah, so the first one that I think everyone can agree on is environmental hazards. There is the environment is just there to kill you. And so
Right.
you're going to get a ton of stuff. I think they actually really did a good job of this in fourth edition, where they had like specific terrain, so like had defiled terrain and sun scorched terrain, that like had mechanical effects, which I thought were great.
Yeah, yeah. And I've found that a lot of the environmental hazards of overland travel can really get underscored if you actually in second edition are digging into how the overland travel rules work. Like the DMG has a pretty simple system for determining if you get lost while you're doing overland travel. And one of
Hmm.
the huge modifiers is if you're traveling on featureless terrain, so like endless sand dunes, increases the chance of getting lost by 50%. So when your characters are just out in the middle of the desert wastes or on the Sea of Silt and there's no landmarks whatsoever, there's really good odds that they're going to wind up off track. And what happens when you're off track? You're out in the wild longer than you expected, and you start to run out of food and water, and you start to really feel that scarcity issue. And environmental hazards crop up in a lot of the published adventures, right there at the beginning of A Little Knowledge. Your characters are thrust into the desert with minimal supplies after the caravan that they're on is raided. And in Dragon's Crown, of course, there's tons of traveling back and forth, and you have to deal with silt storms on the Sea of Silt. In Black Spine, of course, you're navigating through the mountains and dealing with all the problems that come with that in order to get to the Githyanki Fortress and the Planar Gate and all of that sort of business. And naturally, the entire Valley of Dust and Fire is like half about environmental hazards. And so this is a recurring thing. The environment is messed up on Athos, and this is one of the problems that you have to deal with.
Yeah. Aside from the environmental hazards, we also have the fact that Dark Sun is kind of sword and sandal. So it's sort of like low tech, ad hoc weapons, improvised armor. Kind of spears and stones, and your usual swords and metal armor are all rare or uncommon.
Right, and this is hand in hand with when we talk to Tom Baxa about his art. You'll see a lot of pictures of like enemy Templars and things like that, and their armor's all mismatched, and maybe one of them has like a breastplate that's carved out of some sort of giant piece of bone, and then another one is wearing ragged leather straps or something like that. And there's not a lot of uniformity just because the material resources aren't there to field an army of 10,000 people who are all wearing Lorica segmentata, nor does the environment really support wearing metal armor. It's just going to get you killed from the heat, and that sort of underscores that idea that this is classical antiquity themed world where you're using sticks and rocks because that's all you got, and characters will wind up using unconventional weapons, and you wind up having that whole list of unusual dark sun weapons like the dragon's paw and the impaler, and all of these things make an appearance because people are looking for alternatives. Since how many people out there have a full-on 3 foot long steel sword? Not exactly common like it is in the Forgotten Realms, where everyone has one over the mantelpiece.
Yep. And speaking of Tom Baxa, there are some unique monsters in Dark Sun.
Oh yeah.
They are, they look nothing like most creatures from other settings. They're kind of often mutated, or they're alien entities. Some of them seem like monstrosities or like aberrations. There's just so many different creatures. Even the more mundane creatures, like an Athasian bear, is a Klar, which has like tentacles on its face and psionics, of course, and armor on
Hmm.
its back.
Yeah, and this changes how your encounter cadence works because so many of the creatures on Athos have psychic powers that you really need a psionicist in order to defend against some of those things. And you might find yourself in telepathic combat a lot more than you expect. You're like, this thing's just a big angry bear. Why am I engaged in mental combat with it? Um, and the the nature of these creatures again underscores the sort of environmental hazards. The ecosystem has been wrecked, and so the creatures that survived have developed these adaptations that make them look monstrous and even more ferocious and armored and whatnot. Even creatures that aren't predators often will have a wild talent that lets them camouflage or dimension door away or things like that, in order to make their lives simpler. And all of that makes it so that players really have to be kind of on their toes because you don't ever know what you're going to get. You're facing a lot of strange monsters with unusual powers, and it's rarely just like, okay, you're attacked by a pack of 2d6 wolves.
Yeah, in my game recently, actually my last session of my Dark Sun game, I kind of ran a one of the mini adventures from the back of City State of Tyr. It
Hmm.
was the Dagger. Shoot, what was it? Dagger something, and anyways, it had an elf named Merch, and he basically hired the group to go get some steel daggers that are in the desert,
Hmm.
and they knew they were going to be fighting a Soet. I mean, that's part of the part of the hook and everything. Um, and so they get there
Oof.
thinking like they have this plan, right, of what's going to happen, and like they've rolled some some rolls to see like, what they know about the creature, and they know a fair bit about it, so they were confident in their plan. But they what they didn't know, because they didn't really roll high enough, is that uh, that well, so in second edition they're like completely immune to psionics. I just
Right.
made them resistant to psionics, and so but that resistant was enough to basically squash all of their plans, and they had quite an experience with that. So it was a great combat because they were thrown onto their heels.
Oh yeah. One of the other interesting things I've noted is that a lot of Dark Sun monsters have a surprisingly high movement rate. You can't always run away, and that sort of leads to the I don't have to outrun the Clar, I just have to outrun the dwarf sort of gameplay.
Right.
Which ties into the fact that many of these adventures are in very grim circumstances. You have problems with people in distress because of corruption or lack of resources, and there's not always a good guy solution. It's not like there's a clear cut, this is the good guy temple and there's the evil cult, and we're going to help the good guy temple smash the evil cult. It's, Dark Sun adventures tend to be more along the lines of like, we just met 40 refugees in the desert and they're starving and fleeing from monsters, and we don't have enough water to go around. What do we do? How do you solve this problem? And different groups will have different approaches. Someone's like, well, maybe if we can divert our travel over here, there's a village and we can drop off some of the refugees and take care of the problem that way. Or the water cleric says, okay, I'm going to sack all of my first level spells and just prepare create water, but you got no more cure light wounds, guys. Got to live with it. Or your evil players who are just like, oh, we killed them.
Yeah, and along I would say along with kind of grim circumstances are sort of like moral quandaries. Last
Hmm.
time uh, in that same Dark Sun game, although quite a while ago, uh, the characters needed some information, and the only place they could get it was a defiler, Dope Malpain. And
Oh.
so they got a hold of him, and when they asked what they wanted, he was like, okay, but I need this spell book, which happened to be a spell book that the characters had gotten previously because they killed the defiler that owned it, and then they had gotten rid of it, given it to a preserver, and so now they had to go get the spell book back
Hmm.
and then give it to Domal Payne. But like they're giving him a spell book with a lot of spells that he didn't know, and so they're sort of playing with the devil there.
Right, and he's a bad dude, but like the fact that he is so powerful also means that he's privy to this kind of specialized the knowledge that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very much the, like you said, the devil that you know scenario. Like we know that this guy is probably going to use this knowledge for evil, but we have no way of countering him regardless, and we can't do any good without this compromise.
Right. So aside from those, one of the interesting things about Dark Sun is that there are not as many dungeons, because it really wants you to sort of have these wilderness adventures, this overland travel, like you had mentioned
Mhm.
previously, traveling from city state to city state, and political stuff.
Right. There's a few dungeons out there, but like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Dark Sun is about diverging away from Dungeons and Dragons. So you have a dragon, some people that are wannabe dragons, and then a small number of dungeons. But most of the action doesn't really take place in those sorts of set pieces. You're either doing travel across the wastes and dealing with environmental hazards, or you're dealing with political problems and resource problems in the city states themselves. Freedom, the liberation of Tyr module, their first part of the meta plot takes place in the city state of Tyr. It's just all stuff in the city, and there's a little bit of action that can happen in the under tier, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not really a dungeon per se. Um, and then you have adventures like um, Asticlian Gambit, which takes place over in Gulg, and that one is almost all court politics, and then spoilers, it ends with most dangerous game. So that's all wilderness. Um, if you have Black Flames, which we're going to talk about more in a minute, that one's got a bunch of overland travel, and then there's a little bit of exploring of ruins, except that it's not a conventional dungeon in that you go through these ruins and there's not a lot of monsters in there at all, or traps or anything like that, the things that you'd expect to see. I think the most dungeons that I recall are in Dragon's Crown. And of course,
Hmm.
Dragon's Crown is a sprawling epic of an adventure going across multiple books that goes back and forth across the tablelands, and has an ancient castle of the wind mages and giant encounters and encounters in the sewers underneath the city states with defilers that summon demons and whatnot. So it's all over the place, and you can't get away with not having any dungeons at all in that case. But like overall, there's just not a lot of dungeoneering in Dark Sun.
One of my favorite adventures, Merchant House of Amketch, is primarily overland travel, and then a little bit of city state stuff, and then some more overland travel, and then some ruins and stuff. So it's kind of like your classic Dark Sun adventure there. So all of these places that we're talking about, they end up being these grandiose set pieces, and a lot of the adventures that we're kind of just talking about have these features, these ruins from older civilizations, towers and ziggurats of sorcerer kings, sorcerer monarchs, ancient castles, and wars with clashing armies.
Right, and you get this big contrast between the squalor of the common people in the city states, where you might be in something like Arcane Shadows, which basically starts out in a wine shop that has a cellar that gets used by the Veiled Alliance for secret meetings, and it's like this is a kind of a grotty bar in a bad part of town, and then you're hanging out in the basement with some suspicious people, and and then you go from there to a bunch of overland travel, and it eventually takes you to the Tarn west of Tyr, and that's like a massive mountainside lake in a remote part of the wilds, only a short distance from Tyr, but it's like hidden in the foothills of the mountains, so it's hard to find. And you get that sort of contrast between here's the terrible slums of civilization and the most desperate squalor that people are living in. And then here is the grandiose vista of the majesty of untouched nature and a natural water source and protected by a druid and whatnot, so that you get that high sense of contrast. And similarly, when you're dealing with adventures like Freedom and Road to Uruk, you've got stuff that happens inside the ziggurat or at the Golden Tower and in the arena, and it's all these giant Ben Hur and Colossus of Rhodes style spectacular backdrops. Um, and so I think it's kind of uncommon for Dark Sun Adventures to just be like, all right, you're in a 30-foot hallway and you open the door and then there's a 20 by 10 room with an orc sitting on a chest. And instead you have these pieces that are arranged to sort of make it larger than life and to remind you that you're playing in a world that's reminiscent of pieces of classical antiquity from a variety of cultures, and that you are stomping around in the ruins of that world in the aftermath of what happened when this world destroyed itself, and this is what's left behind.
Yeah. So let's see if all of those elements are in one of the adventures. Let's dig into Black Flames.
All right. So first, just the facts, sir. Black Flames dates to 1993, making it kind of midway through the Dark Sun release cycle. It's part of the original box set series of stuff, pre-revised box, but it's 2 years after the 91 release of the original box set. So they've already gotten some of the meta plot out, the novels are out, Freedom is out, and whatnot. But this one was done as a module in the DSM set, Dark Sun Missions, DSM 1. And what this means is it's an unconnected adventure. It's not part of the meta plot. It's just like okay, you've got a player group and they're going to go and do this one-off thing that is not part of the stuff that's happening in other parts of the region. And essentially they're like, we picked a story out of the box set, the story of Yaramuke and the Curse of Black Waters, and we're going to explore that.
So this adventure was written by Sam Witt, and when I went and checked his RPG Geek page, I was surprised, just because I didn't recognize the name, but he's written a ton of stuff, several D&D products. He did a Spelljammer product. He did the Shire's Handbook for what is
Hmm.
it called?
Al
Al
Qadim.
Qadim. Thank you. He did a lot of Earth Dawn, which I love.
Hmm.
Some Midnight, and just a ton of D20 stuff throughout the years.
Yeah, I have a copy of the Shire's Handbook. I remember wearing that out when it came out because it had so many different alternative takes on magicians in the Al Qadim setting. I
Hmm.
even asked questions in Dragon Magazine that showed up in Sage Advice. So thank you, Sam Witt. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
definitely a prolific, creative guy. If you want to see the adventure for yourself, of course, you can get the PDF from Drive Through RPG DM's Guild. They'll also print up a soft cover print on demand format for you, um, which is put together as a single book. The original Adventures form factor is in one of the boxes with a folding front and a pair of flip books and a pamphlet inside. So the soft cover format's a little bit different, but all the content is there. And the watermark PDF is $4.99, and the soft color book is $12.99. So that's a good price compared to scouring eBay for old copies of the original.
Yeah, I mean the prints are, they're definitely serviceable, and they are much cheaper, like you said. Um,
Yeah.
so this adventure is, it's 4 to 6 players, which is kind of a common
Hmm.
number, and it is for levels 3 to 6.
Right, and it includes some pre-generated characters who are mostly around level 5. So it's like a new or just after new sort of group adventure. I suspect that level 3 lower end is in case you've got a group that's got some fifth level characters, and then your younger brother decided to join in and just rolled up a third level guy. It's like, well, okay, yeah, you can bring him along. But definitely the 4 to 6 is much in keeping with second edition, coming down from some of the first edition adventures where they were recommended for 4 to 40.
Right. And remember that in second edition, one of the rules, or one of the, I think it's an optional rule, but was the character trees. So you could have some higher level characters
Hmm.
with a lower level character from, if you took a different character from your tree.
That's true. And if you were playing a high level character and then you've got like a level 3 guy on your tree that you haven't played yet, you could bring them out and dust them off for this adventure.
Exactly.
But you probably won't be able to switch characters even if you use a tree during the adventure for reasons that we'll get into later. And that's tied to what the adventure is about and where it is. It centers around the ruins of Yaramuke, which are presented in the original box set as a city that was destroyed in a war between sorcerer monarchs in an earlier era. And what we eventually learn is that Hamanu destroyed the city and that it was run by a sorcerer queen named Sielba. Um, Interestingly, on the cover of the player flipbook, it says Yaramuke, City of Black Water. So I'm wondering if the adventure name changed during development because most DS adventures have really short names like Freedom, Arcane Shadows, Dragon's Crown. They're usually 2 words. There's a few
Hmm.
exceptions like Merchant House of Amketch.
Right.
Um, and it's interesting that they would call it Black Flames instead of
Hmm.
Black Waters,
Right. Right. They're like, Blackwaters is not that exciting, apparently.
I guess. Even though they again they specifically mentioned it in the initial box set, it's like it's the Blackwater Oasis with the curse of black waters.
Yeah, so it would
So
make sense.
yeah.
You were mentioning that that the adventure itself are these flip books, and like all the other adventures, or most of them, I should say,
Hmm.
they come with some fiction, which is one of the aspects that I really love about all of the Dark Sun adventures. They come with, fiction that is, not just a couple pages. They're usually good chunks, and this one is by Lynn Abbey. It is a story of a Urukite Templar who comes to serve an Evangian.
Yeah, and of course Lynn Abbey does fantastic work. But one of the things I love, like you do, with these bits of fiction that appear in these adventures is that they give us a a way of fleshing out the world a little bit more. You get to see more of how people act and what their world is like, what their lives are like.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's got a young Templar working for Hamanu who has a wild talent that apparently is some sort of clairsentient gift that at first they think it's just kind of a danger sense analog that he's aware, I'm in a sticky spot and what I say or do right now is really going to matter. And then he comes to realize that it also gives him a sort of a nudge, a little bit of guidance to do the right thing in order to survive. Um, but using that talent, he winds up getting picked out by Hamanu to go and investigate a specific problem, which turns out to be an Evangion. And once he meets the Evangion, he realizes like I can't kill this being, not because she's too powerful, but just because she's too majestic, and I've seen the true face of Hamanu, and I know what he is, and I can't work with this guy anymore. And so it's a really interesting dig into what that is like. And it's an interesting angle in that if you run games where you have really high level characters and you start getting into transformation, or they have NPC allies that are transformative, like in Arcane Shadows, um, there's always that question of like, okay, if you're just taking those first tentative steps to becoming an Evangion, aren't the Sorcerer Monarchs going to notice, and aren't they going to just squash you immediately before you could become a threat to them? But in this story, Hamanu's like, he's not really sure entirely how powerful this Evangian is, and he doesn't necessarily want to get tangled up into that. So he sends an agent that's probably disposable to go and sort of suss that out for himself. But Evangions are super charismatic and super wise, and like once this guy meets her, he can't not see what she represents, and then look around at the world and go, "Are we the baddies?" and 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 it's a very interesting look at that particular problem. If your PCs are becoming Evangions or supporting Evangions, like an Evangion is going to generate this kind of support just because of what they are. And they're going to have powerful enemies, but they're also going to have powerful friends. And they're going to convert people to their side just by dint of being like, hey, my existence shows you that there is a better way to live in this world. So that I thought was a super cool element of that fiction.
Yeah, so let's get into the adventure itself. Since you've had more recent experience, I'm
Right.
gonna let you take the lead on this. So, what is the premise of this adventure?
Okay, so Black Flames is all about digging in the ancient ruins of Yarmuke. This is like an opportunity for characters to experience part of the old world, something that was destroyed by Hamanu, and learn a little bit about its history. Um, a lot of the early Dark Sun modules are super directed, like, okay, the PCs have to do this, and then they have to go here. Weirdly, a little knowledge isn't. It's like your caravan gets ambushed, you're liberated, and now you are free to wander the desert until you die of thirst. But then you get into things like freedom and Road to Yorick and uh, the Asticlian Gambit, and all of them have stuff in there that's like, okay, this happens, and now the DM must make sure that these things happen and the players go here. So those feel heavily directed, and this one is much the same. Players are sort of pushed into completing a set of tasks and then trying to escape with their lives. And to motivate you, you get two, not one, but two terrible things pushing you. One is the infamous Curse of Black Waters. That actually gets statted out in the pamphlet, the storybook. What happens when you get the curse? Side note, it's really bad. Um, and then number two is your patron, if you will, you can hear my air quotes for this adventure, is a guy named Farklun who claims to be a nomad who runs across the PCs once they've, gotten lost in the desert and whatnot, and he saves their bacon and says, "Hey, I need your help with a thing." He arranges the situation so they get cursed, and then he's like, "Mwahaha! Now you have to work for me, or the curse will never be lifted, and you will die and become undead and suffer forever." And turns out the PCs don't know this immediately. Farklun's a dragon. He's another like 21st level Defiler Psionic dragon, but he's not a sorcerer monarch. He's just some other Defiler that managed to do the transformation. Where did he come from? Where does he go? We don't know. So
So, how does it proceed after they sort of taken the hook?
well, it's a pretty short adventure. And there's some weird assumptions. It starts with the assumption that you're traveling between Uruk and Ram because Yarmuke is somewhere off of that trade route just a little bit. And that explains why Yarmuke was ostensibly a trade city back in the day. It's between two of the other cities, and so it can serve as a stopping point and a hub between them. It has a big oasis nearby, which now is cursed. So it's a great watering hole, a perfect spot along the road. So set to be an economic powerhouse. Um, but what winds up happening is a big sandstorm hits your group. You can't see anything. You're totally turned around. You got sand in your mouth. Um, Anakin and Padme are both very unhappy about it. Um, you get the sandstorm lifts, and you're like, where the heck are we? We're totally lost. And there's a note in the adventure that the sandstorm's a magic sandstorm that was made by Farklun as a spell that he invented, and that it um, allows him to sort of control weather and use it to teleport people. So it's sort of like the Dark Sun version of the Mists of Ravenloft. Instead of like a sinister mist arises and you can't see in front of your face, and then when it's gone, you're somewhere else. And now it's like a nasty sandstorm hits and it scours the skin off of your skull, and then when it's done, you're like, where the heck am I? Because I've been teleported. Which raises the question of why do you have to start in any particular place? This sandstorm could just hit you anywhere and then drop you off and you're out of the okay. This is not the first weird choice that we will encounter. Um, the sandstorm also incidentally ruins all of your food and water. The GM's supposed to say like, okay, you go through your supplies, the sand has gotten into everything. Your food is ruined. Your water is turned into mud. Your water skins have been pierced and scoured by the sandstorm and they've leaked out and everything you had was gone and it's been a super hot sandstorm going for 8 hours, so you're really thirsty and hungry. Enter Farcloon. He shows up with a bunch of pals and he's like, "Hey, we're a nomad tribe and we saw you out here. You look a little bit distressed. That sandstorm looks like it took a lot out of you. Fortunately, we have a bunch of supplies. Why don't you have a seat and have lunch with us and we can like chat about stuff?" And basically Farkland's nomads are a bunch of undead that he has animated, and then he's thrown an illusion on them, so you can't tell that they are undead. They can't talk though, so if you try to talk them, Farkland's like, no, 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 he doesn't talk. Talk to me. So there's stuff that can make the PCs a little bit suspicious, but then there's like a real strict directive to the DMs, like you must get the Curse of Blackwater onto some of the PCs. It doesn't have to be everybody, but some of them have to get it. And the way they get it is that Farkland's carrying a bunch of water from the Oasis of Blackwater, and that's what he offers to the PCs to drink. And this raises another question. How long is this curse good for? Like, could a bard go to the Oasis of Blackwater, fill up a water skin with it, and then go back to a city state and just put a couple drops of this in the drinks of a bunch of people at a table, and then 4 days
Mm.
later they're all dead from the curse of Blackwater? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I guess it depends on your DM.
Yeah.
um, so, based on the rules in the pamphlet for the curse, you probably have like a day and maybe less, maybe a day and a half to complete the whole adventure because the curse goes in stages that are measured in hours. And once you get to about stage 3, you're rolling dice to see if your character just wanders off aimlessly into the desert to find food and water. And at stage 4, you're in mindless berserker rage phase, and then you die and turn into an undead. And you can't remove the curse with conventional magic, especially not if you're a third level character. So you are now on a ticking clock. Farcloon is like, Wahaha, I know how to lift the curse, but I won't do it unless you do a job for me first. And this means you don't really get to rest during the adventure. You have to do it all in one go. And for third level characters, that's kind of a tall ask. Now, Farclin at least has the good sense to say, okay, since I'm going to have you do this job for me, I want you to succeed. So he equips you with a bunch of gear. He's got a bunch of armor and weapons. He's even got some magic weapons, some healing potion fruits, and food and water that are not compromised. And they specifically call out that a ration weighs 1 pound, which is pretty amazing because the player's handbook never settles on the weight for rations. And even all the way down to 5th edition, they are inconsistent about how much 1 day's ration of food weighs. So that was interesting. And then right after that, they say that the water skins are 1 gallon each, and a player's handbook says they're half a gallon. So nobody knows. That's the lesson.
All kinds of different equipment.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of like bronze armor and stuff, which of course, if you're wearing that, you're going to get all the heat exhaustion problems. So it's, you know, I get the feeling that it was sort of Farklin has a bunch of stuff that he's gotten out of some ruins, and he's just like, help yourselves. But if you decide to be ridiculously short-sighted about it, that's your problem. And then there's a little bit that says that later in the adventure, if the PCs need a specific piece of gear and they forgot to bring it, Farcloon will produce it because he's super intelligent. And he's like, oh, you guys didn't bring rope. Well, you're lucky that I have rope with me, but he will only do this 3 times. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a nice, mechanism, especially if you have a group of newer players who aren't familiar with we need rope and a 10-foot pole and some oil and some pitons and spikes and some marbles and a bag of sand and another bag of sand. So um, it gives you a little out there. Um, After you get equipped, Farkland's like, okay, now we're going to go to the ruins of Yarramuke, and it's just 15 miles away from here. But the sandstorm lets off at mid-afternoon, so you can't get there before nightfall. So you have to travel part way, camp, and then get to the ruins. But we're on the timer of the Curse of Black Waters. So things are getting really, really bad already, and you're not even at the adventure site.
So, you said that uh Farkloon is a dragon. Like why
Right.
does he need the help of these third to sixth level PCs?
I'm glad you asked because that is part of the MacGuffin of the adventure is that as part of the war that happened that destroyed Yarramuke, there's a magical phenomenon left behind. There's a bunch of areas that are like wild magic zones in the ruins of the city, but there's a giant sort of dome around it. They call it the wall, and it causes powerful entities that enter the dome to lose access to some of their senses. And this is kind of a head scratcher. They go, what? Why does it do what? But the the MacGuffin is basically that if Farklin enters the wall, or like another sorcerer monarch does or whatnot, um, he becomes blind. Um, he can only retain his sense of touch and hearing, so he can't smell anything, he can't see anything, um, and he can't taste anything. So he needs some patsies that he can direct to help guide him around the city until he finds the thing that he wants, which is Cielba's magical library, the former sorcerer queen of the city. So he needs the PCs to find all of that stuff for him because they can go into the wall and they're low enough level that it doesn't affect them. And this is like part of that sort of I was mentioning railroady plot phenomenon. It's like, what is this? Well, it is an excuse for the dragon to need PCs to do this thing. Okay, sure, you know. Um, so at some point you get through the wall, Farklin goes blind, and you end up having to lead him around by hand or tie a rope to him. And it even recommends that like at certain points Farklin should get excited about something and just go running off like 50 feet away or something like that and force the PCs to try and catch up to him. And he's really snappy and constantly threatening you. And again, you don't necessarily know he's a dragon at this point, but you know that he's pretty powerful. You know that you're under the curse of Blackwater, and supposedly he's the only one that can lift it. And he is there to get Cielba's spell books and research notes, which is a strong indication that he is or works for a defiler. In this case, he is, but PCs will be like, yeah, okay, there's no reason to want those spell books unless you need them for your own magic. So you get into the city, you got your blind evil dragon lord with you, and now you have two parts. You got the exterior of the city and you got the interior. So the city exterior is a bunch of small ruined buildings, some sinkholes, some wild magic zones. There's literally a visitor center that's like a Disney animatronic. You put coins in it and it tells you about the history of the city and shows you pictures of it. And this is kind of wild. Like this is not the sort of thing that you would expect. A coin operated movie machine in Dark Sun seems a little weird, but Magic Mouth is an existing spell. Illusion spells exist, so okay. Um, I I guess since this was a trade city that was known for its powerful economy, that you get a lot of visitors, and maybe one of them is going to throw a ceramic piece into this coin so that they can get the lay of the land. But what this is used for in this adventure is that there's a puzzle to get into the inside of the palace. It's got like a magical seal on it, and you can only open that seal if you get a pair of MacGuffins and you put them in the right place at the right time. It's like Indy with the map room.
Right.
And when you do that, it opens the magical seal, and now you can enter the palace and you can go and get Cielba's research notes. Um, and the visitors center shows you what the city used to look like, so you know where the MacGuffins have to get put. You're like, oh, we need this eye and this orb, and that one has to be here, and that one has to be there. Um, so you get that information, and then you go around, you search the barracks, you search the local ruins, you search a museum, And you eventually you find this eye and this orb, and you have to put them in a pair of places. One of them goes up on a statue, and then the other one's supposed to go on top of a tower for a temple that I think it was an Earth temple back in the day. The problem is that the tower has been destroyed; it's long, long gone. So now you have to put the orb 40 feet up in the air, and this has to happen at sunset. So your PCs need a way to keep the orb suspended in the air for however long it takes for the magic to go off. And if you don't have levitate or telekinesis, like, sucks to be you. So you get all of that done, and finally it's like, okay, we've unlocked the palace, but the palace is just this heap of rubble. How are we going to get anything out of it? And Farkland's like, ah, ha, ha, I am a powerful wizard. Watch this. And he casts Sands of Time, which, for those who aren't familiar with, it's a super high level spell in Dark Sun that rolls back the effects of time on inanimate objects. So you can take like a badly eroded statue or stone tablet, and you can remove all of the wear from the ages from it. Or you can take a collapsed house and make it whole and new again. And the palace is big enough that Farklun has to cast the spell several times in order to restore enough of it for you to be able to explore it. 7 times, in fact. In the adventure module, I get the impression that this was one of those weird, like, last minute things where um, Sam Witt probably was like, okay, he uses this spell to make the palace roll back so you can explore it. And then one of the designers at TSR said the spell's not big enough to do the whole palace. He has to cast it multiple times. Then Sam's like, no, it's fine. He has 6 more scrolls of it.
Yeah.
He's blind though because of the wall. How is he reading scrolls? Anyway,
So jumping back to
yeah.
the animatronic thing, I like that because it's kind of like uh in a lot of like post-apocalyptic movies, they like find history, and they find cameras or pictures of the
Hmm,
past, and
hmm.
like they have no idea what it is, and like it's like this amazing technology, and I feel like that is calling back to a little bit of that kind of
Yeah,
aspect.
and certainly if you play it out that way, you can get this to be the way that you are showing the players the history of Yarumuke. Here's what the city was back in its prime. Here's what it was like before it was destroyed by Hamanu, and you can get sort of a sense, if you want to just be descriptive about it, of this is what the people were like, this is what their day to day was like, as it's showing pictures of the city, and you can dive into that as much or as little as you want. But it's all post facto. It's like you're watching videos of people who are long dead, so you're not really participating in their story. You're just hearing about it secondhand.
Hmm.
Um, so while you're doing all of this exploration, there's a few monsters. There's a dwarven banshee, there's a scorpion in one of the barracks and whatnot, but not a lot of combat. Now, there's 2 notable groups of monsters in the outer city. One's a tribe of Gith that lives in a cave, and one is a group of silt runners that live in a ruin. Um, if you are just exploring everything, you may run across them, and then you're going to have one of your big, D&D style battles. Which is perfectly fine. But the real reason they're there is that while you're searching around doing all this stuff for Farklun, there's also someone else who wants Cielba's research notes, and that's the Sorcerer Queen Abalak Ree. And just like Farklun, she can't go into the city because of the wall. She's got the same problem. She'd be blind and whatnot, and that's a problem. But she's got an agent that's shadowing you, that's a T'Chaub, one of the aforementioned weird monsters of Dark Sun. And this T'Chaub reports back to her psionically. So it's sort of shadowing you to see what you do and see if it can steal anything useful that you find. And depending on how things go, the Chaub may lead the Gith or the Silt Runners to you in order to start a fight so that then it can wait until someone gets dropped and then yoink stuff off of them and run away. But
Nice.
that's more likely to happen near the end of the adventure when you're leaving than at the start when you're going in, because when you're leaving, your packs are full of useful stuff.
Right.
Anyway, so you made it to the palace. You've unlocked it. Farklin has rolled back time with the 6 scrolls that are apparently in Braille. And the palace itself is not very large. It's mostly empty rooms. And they have 1 or 2 sentence descriptions. This is because the flip book is it's a very small format. The word count's not very high. So these things are perforce naturally small. It's like, here's 1 page about the palace. It has 10 rooms, and each gets 1 to 2 sentences of description. There's a ton of loot in here. Like, it's not enumerated. It's There's 3 rooms that are described as having hundreds upon thousands of coins of all types, and Cielba's bedroom is described as having a huge bed surrounded by an ankle-deep layer of metal coins. So I guess you're supposed to use Farklund to keep pressure on the PCs, and he's like, "Don't bother yourself with the coins. We're here for the books." But man, if you don't come out with a double fistful of metal coins from this, you're doing something wrong as an adventurer.
Sounds like it.
I just have like this picture in my head of Cielba like Scrooge McDuck swimming through a vault of coins. Um, so you sort of work your way through all of these empty rooms, and again, it's like the visitor center in that you're getting to see what the palace was in the past because it's been temporarily restored by sands of time, and uh, and you get all these descriptions of all the places in the palace. Here's the bedroom, here's the bath, here's where she did her makeup or whatever. But it's like, taken out of time. There's no people here. There's no interaction. There's no puzzles to solve. There's no questions to answer or challenges to confront. So it's just sort of like, okay, you walk into this room and here's the text. And then you go to the next room and here's the text because that text is purely descriptive. It doesn't give the players things to do.
Mm.
So you make your way down to a sub level and then to another sub level. And you get to sub level 2. There's nothing to stop you. There's no traps. There's no locked doors. There's no monsters. You find the magic lab. And this is where all of Cielba's old research notes and implements and things are, including her obsidian orbs, because she was a dragon or in the process of dragon transformation, research books, and the scroll of black waters, which is the super important plot MacGuffin as far as the PCs are concerned. So each room in this lab, there's multiple rooms to the lab because she's like, this is my library and this is my alchemy lab and whatnot. Each room has a few sentences of description, and then it lists how many turns does it take to search this. So, for instance, if you are searching the library of spell theory, it takes 60 turns to search. So if you have one player searching that, that's 10 hours. Your Curse of Black Waters is now on stage 3, son. Things are looking grim. Um, so you can run out of time from the curse without ever even finding the scroll if you get unlucky. So it's like you've got a ton of stuff to search. Farklund's breathing down your neck and demanding that you get the stuff. And the scroll itself is hidden inside of a secret panel that you have a small chance to find. And it's like you could just miss the plot critical item. Oops.
Yeah.
Um, there is a page where it says, okay, if the PCs do all the searching and they miss the thing and they don't find the plot critical widget, Farklund casts True Seeing on one of them. And then this causes more problems because first, you don't see the secret panel unless you're looking in the right place. And second, if you see Farklund, you see that he's actually a dragon. You see through the illusion, and he doesn't want that because he's afraid once you realize what he is, he's that you're going to just peace out. So the adventure kind of assumes like, all right, you're going to find the scroll because otherwise it's over. And then you have a little brief back and forth with Farklund where he says, awesome, you found the scroll, you found the spell books, I got everything that I came here for, bag up those obsidian orbs. Thank you, minions, time to die. And he basically slaps the PCs around for a couple of rounds. And the guidance in the module says, you should threaten the PCs and make them feel scared, and maybe one of them gets killed. Oh, okay. But
Oops.
your job isn't. It's not for the PCs to kill Farklund here. And similarly, before he kills them, Abalakari shows up because the scroll's been found. And so she's like, "That's the thing that I specifically want." So she makes a personal appearance. And this to me is wild. You've got like a 21st level draconic defiler, and then a sorcerer queen shows up, and they engage in a tableau battle where the two of them are fighting, and Abalakri comes with a bunch of undead. They're fighting while they're blind, so just throwing spells or maybe using like psionic powers to do telepathic combat by using life detection to target the other person's mind and then try and attack them with telepathic modes. So they're fighting, and then the PC's job is to run away because you there is no good outcome to you
Yeah.
taking a side in this battle.
They're
Um,
they're just like
while
ants
this
watching giants.
yeah, while this fight is happening, Abalak Ree helpfully monologues about the scroll of black water and why she wants it, and in the process explains that what you really need to do is take it back to the oasis of Blackwater, because that's where you can use it to lift the curse. So assuming everything goes well for your PCs, and they run out of there, and they aren't forced to switch to other members of their character tree after everyone dies. They run away from the big fight. If you didn't deal with the T'Chaub earlier, now he sends all the Silt Runners and the Gith to fight you uh, when you get out of the palace. But before you even get out of the palace, now the place is full of undead. So it's this weird sort of like you walk through the palace and see all these rooms and they're all empty. But on the way back, they're full of monsters.
Hmm.
Except the palace has guardians in the form of all these statue golems, and those animate and fight the monsters. So again, it's a tableau battle where it's like the real thing you should be doing is just running away.
Hmm.
Um, so a lot of this gives the feeling that like the players don't have a lot of choices. You are being directed to do specific things, and then when a puzzle or a conflict comes up, there is one solution. And if you engage in any of these combats are here to showcase that everything is dangerous, but you're not actually supposed to fight anything because if you do, you're just going to die.
I mean, yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
in fifth edition, or another edition, they would probably make those, like the combats are there, but it's not really to battle. Maybe there's sort of like, some skill checks to get through, or maybe there's, a couple of undead to fight to just kind of show the chaoticness of the situation.
Right. Yeah, and I think that second edition didn't really have a lot of skill checks as challenges in
Right.
adventures. Like proficiencies exist, but the idea of building adventures around skill checks wasn't a big thing yet. And I think you're absolutely right that that's a really interesting direction to take it. Is like, okay, your goal now is escape the palace, and there is an army of undead between you and the exit. And then when you get out of the palace, you have to escape the silt runners and the Gith. Um, and you could engage them at targeted spots where it's like, okay, there's three undead in this room, and if we kill them, we can go directly to the stairs. So we'll just engage those guys and then run for it. But most of the time, it's like, how can we sneak past? How can we collapse a doorway so that they can't get to us? How can we create a distraction or get the silt runners and the Gith to fight each other or any of these sorts of things where the players take some agency. They have some action that allows them to move the adventure forward.
Hmm.
Um, so PCs have run from the dragon fight. They've run from the T'Chaub stuff. They've run from a bunch of undead. They get out of the city. The Oasis is thankfully very close by. I presume it was the major water source for the city in its heyday. And the module suggests you do a slog through a bunch of undead at this point. You meet some cursed dead, which are intelligent zombies that just want release and are like, please free me. And then hungry bodies, which are evil zombies that are like, brains. Um, so you're fighting your way through these guys. You get to the Oasis, you've got the scroll, and then you're like, nobody knows how to use this. it's,
Uh-oh.
it's gibberish. Even if you can read magic, it's too powerful for your wizard to understand, and it doesn't make any sense. And you're like, oh boy. And so a bunch more of the zombies, the cursed dead, come out of the hungry dead come out of the oasis itself. And the suggestion here is that you fight a bunch more zombies, and it says that the DM should probably pull punches, but a player character will probably die here. Just give them a heroic death. I'm like, okay. And then you have a mini LARP scene where uh, you you've killed the zombies, you meet the druid who oversees the oasis, and this guy, like, I would imagine, I'm just putting on my thinking cap for a second. If I'm a druid in Dark Sun and my job is to protect a particular feature of the landscape, and the feature that I have to protect is the oasis of black water, which has been cursed for hundreds of years. Anyone who drinks the water turns into a vengeful undead, and that's my land feature. So really my job is just to hang here at this oasis, and then someone stumbles out of the desert and goes water, and you go, no, don't drink it. Oh shit, too late. That would kind of suck.
Yeah,
I'd kind of
yeah.
hate my job. So but the druid can use the scroll. So you give him the scroll, and then he's casting the spell, and you have to fight zombies while he's doing that. And then they say, okay, make this into a mini LARP, and you should put on some strobe lights and some house fans as the black flames rise up and the wind kicks up and whatnot. It even has the suggestion of like, oh, if you're going to be using strobe lights and stuff like that to simulate the thunder that's going on as the spell's going off, just
That's
carry a little
wild.
pen light so you can keep reading the module.
That is wild.
Yeah. Um, and then finally, the curse is lifted, Everybody's freed from the curse. The oasis is no longer cursed, so it becomes the oasis of cool springs. The druid is like, oh, I didn't think this would happen in my lifetime. And then Farkland shows up again. So he got away from Abalak Ree, and Abalak Ree presumably just wants the stuff that's in Cielba's palace, so she doesn't pursue him. But he makes it here because he knows you've got the scroll, and he attacks. And it's like, this could have
Hmm.
maybe used a little extra guidance. It
Hmm.
says that he's badly weakened, and then the adventure continues after the PCs can kill him. But there's like zero guidance about what this means in practical terms. 21st level dragon versus a party of potentially third level Dark Sun characters, and I'm expecting them to win. So how badly wounded is he? What
Yeah.
spells does he have left? Like, I could just cast a chain lightning and the fight's over. Has he
Right.
used up everything? Does he have 3 hit points and one hit from the dagger just does him? That feels anticlimactic, though. So it would have been nice if there had been a little more guidance about, like, okay, Farkland shows up and you're supposed to let the PCs kill him, and he should be about like this at
Right.
this point.
He's cast all his high level spells. He's only got these left.
Right. And he's the
Second levels.
equivalent of a challenge for a group of banged up fourth and fifth level characters who've been fighting zombies all afternoon.
Right.
So you finally you put the knife in him and you get rid of those last 3 hit points, and you have a little wrap up with the druid. He explains that the curse is lifted. Everything's great. You can drink the water. It's free. And then you're off to wherever you go next to, cause further problems. And there's a little page about, here's some of the things that are going to be a thorn in your PC's side after this. Like, Abalak Ree definitely took notice of you, and she's like, okay, you're low on my list of things, but if you ever show up in her city, your face is probably on a poster somewhere with a Templar standing next to it, looking around at the crowd. Um, the T'Chaub, if you didn't kill him, they recommend turning him into a recurring enemy who's constantly just trying to create weird plots to try and get the characters into trouble. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and there's other repercussions that can happen. Like, you've earned the friendship of this druid, and you now know the location of this great oasis and this ruined city that has 3 full rooms of multiple kinds of coins. Um, Now, I guess the spell's a load bearing spell because, as usual, the ruins collapse after all of this, and so if you want to get those coins, you're gonna do a lot of digging. But it does raise questions like, well, why don't the PCs just set up shop here? The druid likes you, the water's fine. Could make your own village. Um, the obvious answer is, like, if you continue hanging out here, then eventually Abalak Ree's agents and Templars are going to show up, and you're going to have a fight on your hands. But, like,
Hmm.
maybe you want to go that direction with your campaign. PCs make a village, and now they have to defend it because eventually, if you do something like that, Sorcerer Kings are always going to come for you.
Right. So we are kind of running in almost an hour at this point.
Yeah,
You have, you kind of mentioned throughout your walkthrough, some of the issues. Were there any
yeah.
other kind of big issues that you didn't hit in the walkthrough?
Well, yeah, there's a few others. Like, again, I get the impression that this adventure was kind of rushed, or maybe, Sam Witt turned in his manuscript and he got a bunch of feedback, and then it was like, okay, please address all of this feedback. You have a 2-day turnaround time or something. And so it's like, okay, he has 6 scrolls. I forgot he's blind.
Right.
The One of the MacGuffins that you have to get, the orb, to get into the palace. Um, it's in a museum. This museum is full of a bunch of abstract art, which it describes looks like a bizarre puzzle. This frankly made me mad when I read it. I was like, you're really telling me that you put the PCs on a timer and then you set up a room where I'm supposed to tell them that stuff looks like some sort of puzzle, so that they spend hours dicking around
Mm.
and not achieving anything.
Yeah.
And, like, it's not, a feel bad moment.
Right. Right.
Like, there's nothing to be gained except a sense of failure for the PCs.
Right. It's
So,
like the putting your hand to the orb of annihilation.
right, right. Well, I feel around in the gargoyle mouth. And now you're the barbarian in the sequel module. So you go into the museum, and it's in the room descriptions. It's like room number 8. The door here is like covered with rubble, so you have to dig out the rubble in order to bust open the door and get into the room, and the orb is inside. And there's a magic dagger that you might have gotten earlier that vibrates when you're close to the orb, so that you know you're in the right place. Room 8 doesn't appear on the map. Like, where is
Little
the
oversight.
orb, the thing that you need to complete the adventure? Where is it? So, um, most disappointingly to me, the whole thing is like this glimpse into the past of a now dead city state and a queen who fought Hamanu and lost. But we learned very little about the city state and the queen during the adventure. It's like
Hmm.
this adventure is supposed to be about Yaramuke. How much do we know at the end of the adventure about Yaramuke? Well, not a lot. We know that Cielba had, Scrooge McDuck levels of coins. That she had a sorceress lab. That she kept a bunch of orbs for dragon transformation. So yes, she was one of the champions of Rajat. We know that she lost the war, but there's her body is never found. We don't know what happened to her. Did like Hamanu tie her to a chariot and drag her through the streets or something? Don't know. What were the people like? What was the culture like? What was the city like in its heyday?
Hmm.
When it was thriving. What was nuked from the surface of Athos and gives us a sense of loss, an idea that this is a thing that existed before, and now in our broken world, it is gone and it will never return. We don't know. So the players really feel like observers in a lot of this module. They're
Hmm.
looking at ruins and they're looking at all of these things that they are compelled to get for other people, but they have very little agency and they don't learn a lot about themselves or about this place in the course of the adventure. And so it's pretty railroady. And I feel like if you want to have this adventure be about these ruins, do something with their history, like you were saying about the visitor center. Show us what this place was, give us some understanding of who these people were,
Hmm.
and maybe make the players make choices that rely on that knowledge. Having learned this is what Yaramuke was like, this is what the people valued, this is what their arts and traditions were. Now I know, oh, if I was going to hide the eye from this statue that I need to open a magical gateway, and I was a person of Yaramuke hundreds of years ago, where would I put that eye? And it's not just we search every building until we dig out all of the rubble and we find the thing, but instead it's I went to Yaramuke, I learned about it, and in knowing the place, I have learned how to find its secrets.
Right. So overall, it kind of seems like this adventure is just rushed. Looks like missing rooms with critical items. There's this railroad plot and set piece battles that the PCs can't really do anything in, and you're just kind of pushed through this hollow shell of a city. Um, so, what would you do with this if you were going to run this again?
Well, I'm glad you asked because I did run it, but I altered it heavily. And what I decided to do was I wanted the players to experience Yaramuke and its history in a very personal way. So um, I made it so that Yaramuke was the palace was inside of a time bubble, like temporal stasis. That this was the last thing that Cielba did when Hamanu came and wrecked her house. She put up this shell that froze her palace in time, and now she can't get out, but nobody can get in and nobody can touch it. And to get inside, the PCs have to jump through the hoops that you do in the exterior of the city, get the eye and the orb, put them in the right places at sunset, and then this hole opens in the time bubble and you can step through into the past. Um,
Nice.
and so I literally sent the PCs back in time to when Yaramuke is being invaded by Hamanu. And this means that now they have to participate in the defense of the city. And you might be thinking, they're like, well, the city's going to fall one way or another. We know because we were just there in the future and it's destroyed. And, maybe we can change the past. I don't know. Paradox, Chronomancer, don't want to think too hard about it. Um, but they they're like our overriding thing is we got to remove the curse of black waters or we're all going to die. And to do that, we need to buy time to figure out how to get the stuff that will remove the curse. So they wind up talking to Cielba herself, who's clairsentient. She's a sorcerer queen, so she's a psionic wizard. She's got future knowledge of certain things, and she's like, "Yes, you are who I've been waiting for. I knew that you were going to come from the future to save me."
Nice.
And they're like, a sorcerer queen. Okay, this is a little grim. So they wind up in command of a bunch of Sielba's military. And her military cannot stand up to Urik's. Hamanu is too good of a warrior. He's got more troops, they're better trained, they're better equipped. He's got half giant warriors and stuff. Yarmouke in its heyday is a trade city. From the little information we have, Sielba was involved in some economic warfare with Hamanu. Like probably she was charging extra taxes on stuff coming from Rayam to Urik, and he just got sick of it and was like, "That's it, I'm taking your city." Um, she can't field an army that can stand against him, and so the PC's job is not to win this war. The city's going to be destroyed. That's future history. It's written, but it's to delay it long enough for Sielba to complete the Curse of Black Water. In the original module, Hamanu is the one who casts the curse because he wants to demonstrate his power. This city stood against me. I razed it to the ground and I cursed those oases so no one could ever drink from it again. In my version, Sielba says, the real reason Hamani wants my city is it's an economic powerhouse. We're rich. We have
Hmm.
all this money and water and food and whatnot, and he wants it. And he wants to kick me over and put one of his Templars in charge and turn my city state into a client state of Uruk. And if he succeeds, he will have more power than any other sorcerer king, temporally speaking, in the tablelands, because he will have the products of two cities. And with all of the food and water and money generated by Yaramuke, he can field the greatest army the Tableland has ever seen, and then go on a conquering spree, and that's it, game over. Um,
Yeah, that sounds
so,
like a much kind of better reason. Like, yeah, why would Hamanu curse this
so
amazing?
Hamanu doesn't want it cursed. He wants to
Right,
capture this fertile area so
exactly,
that he can use
exactly.
it to increase his wealth. And Cielba curses it with the whole: if I can't have it, no one can have it.
Hmm.
I'm going to destroy it so that Hamanu cannot take it. She casts the curse, and the PCs had to buy enough time for her to do this, so that they could see her cast it, so that their spellcasters could reverse engineer it.
Mm, nice.
Um, and so she casts the curse, and then she casts the time bubble. Um, but Hamanu has been forced to withdraw at this point. um, he's basically sent in like a bunch of his Templars and warriors and stuff like that to go rampaging through the palace, and the PCs are holding them off inside the palace as the city is crumbling outside, and Hamanu is chortling in victory and whatnot. And then she casts the time bubble sphere that's going to trap the the palace in the past. And she's like, okay, spells going off. We have X amount of time to get out. And so now the thing becomes, all right, the PCs are on the run, but it's not that they're running from a fight between two dragons. It's that they're running to get out before the door closes, and they have to cut down Hamanu's Templars along the way.
Hmm.
Um, when they get out, they have, because they came in from their present, the future, as far as Ciel was concerned, they return to their point in time,
Hmm.
and the dome collapses. Time catches up with the palace, and it falls into ruin behind them. And the sun sets on Yaramuke, because you go in at sunset, because that's when the eye and the orb trick works.
Hmm.
But Cielba's with them, and now she's out.
Nice.
And uh, and so this neatly is like, okay, they now know how to reverse the spell of Black Waters because they saw her cast it and they have her research notes.
Hmm.
Cielba kind of owes them a favor, but she's still a sorcerer queen. You don't really trust her. And she's like, my city has turned into a bunch of rubble and sand. Well, nobody knows that I'm still alive, so I'll have this fixed up in a jiffy. And that means that you don't want to hang out once you fix the oasis. You get down to the oasis of Blackwater, you work with the druid, you cast the spell, you let one of the players do it so they feel good about having achieved something, and then they remove the curse, and the druid's like, yeah, okay, so if Cielba's out and she's rebuilding her city, she's going to want this water, which means you cannot stay. I'll be okay because I can hide in my guarded lands and nobody can find me, and I can reverse the effects of defiling here with rejuvenate spells and whatnot. But you guys got to go.
Hmm.
You got to move. So that neatly wrapped up a bunch of those problems. It put the PCs in the middle of the history of Yaramuke, let them actually fight against Hamanu in one of the ancient wars, control massive armies, even as low-level characters. They're third to sixth level, but Cielba has put them in charge, because she knows that being from the future, they are destined to do things that are going to save her. She doesn't like ultimately she doesn't care about the city as much as she cares about saving her own skin, and so
Right.
that's what she's out to do.
That makes sense.
And it nicely closes the loop of she has a strong reason to make the curse. They learn it by watching her, and then they are able to undo the curse, and it feels like their actions actually matter.
Hmm. Nice. So basically, in that version, kind of Farkloon didn't have to be a dragon. There was no Abalakare. Um, you just didn't need
Right.
those elements.
Exactly. So like I don't need that extra pressure. In my version actually my PCs didn't know any better and a couple of them drank the water from the oasis just on their own, unprompted.
Nice.
Do not read explosive runes. Um and so they got the curse and then Farkloon shows up and he's just this nomad with a bunch of silent, traveling companions and he explains the curse and he's like, "You guys are screwed. There may be one way out from this. The curse was originally cast by the queen of this ancient city nearby. If you can get there and find her, her palace, you might be able to find a way to remove the curse. But I don't know."
Hmm.
And then in this version, like Farklund isn't forcing them to do anything. He doesn't necessarily even have to be a dragon. And because he doesn't need to cast Sands of Time, we don't need to worry about the problems with the scroll. We don't
Hmm.
even have to use the wall.
Hmm.
Like the whole idea that there's a sort of Deus Ex Machina that keeps creatures from being able to see when they're inside of the city boundaries
Hmm.
doesn't matter
Right.
because we don't have to worry about powering down dragons so that the PCs can deal with stuff there. It just becomes motivated by their survival. We got to go in, find the way to remove this curse, and the way to do that is we unlock this time bubble and go back in time
Hmm.
and experience what happened to this city that caused the curse in the first place. They're actually complicit in the creation of the curse that winds up afflicting them.
Yeah, I mean, your that version sounds fantastic. It solves a lot of the issues that you and others have had with this adventure, and I think that's fantastic. I ran this adventure back in high school, but I really don't remember
Oh
almost
no.
anything about it. Um, but when I was researching a bit for the show, I found this cool alteration that I thought really gives more gravity to the
Mhm.
situation. What they did is instead of kind of removing Farkloon and Abalakare, Red King on the arena forums at athos.org gives a more detailed background for Farkloon that ties him in more deeply with Abalakare. It's a great backstory and definitely well worth the read. It basically says that Farkloon was one of Abalakare's Templars, and he, you know, is still trying to gain power as after he left her service, and so it gives it a little bit more, just more reasons for them to know each other. It gives like how the PCs find this. I'm not really sure, but I just thought it was a better angle than just what was in the book.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds fantastic. I need to look that up. But giving that connection between Abalakri and Farkloon makes it personal, and it
Hmm.
also makes it so that it's not like, where did Farkloon come from? I don't know. He's
Right.
just this dude that walked out of the sand with an army of masked undead, and decided to use the PCs as his whipping boys. It makes it so that like all of this structure starts to make sense. Abalakri obviously knew about Yaramuke. She knew Cielba from their time as champions of Rajat. So this history would be available to Farkloon if he's one of her High Templars or Defilers in her structure.
Hmm.
And he learns about, oh, there was another sorcerer monarch who got killed over in this other place. And all of her research notes were left behind. That's
Hmm.
what another thing that bugged me about the original formulation of the adventure. It's like Cielba gets killed and her city gets sacked, and then all of her dragon notes and magical research library and everything is just left there. Like Hamanu doesn't say, "Box all that shit up and take it to my palace post haste."
Right, and all the coins too.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Interesting. Well, this sounds like a fun adventure, even though it's got problems. Like really, all adventures have some, but this one seems
It's
to have a
true.
few more than others.
Yeah, it's got some hurdles, but the neat part is that for a DM, you can take those hurdles and then say, okay, how do I work around this for my group? And then you get interesting solutions for it.
Definitely, yeah. That's the fun of being a DM for sure.
And ultimately, the inspiration is really there of your in the Dark Sun world and you're exploring the ruins of a city that was destroyed in one of the early wars before your time,
Hmm.
and you get to see like this is what the full might of the Sorcerer Monarchs can do. If there is an actual war between the city states, this could be what happens to your home 20 years from now.
Nice. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Bone, Stone, and Obsidian. We talked about Black Flames and about Dark Sun Adventures in general. So just actually, if you want to get a hold of us, you can email us at obsidian@athos.org, and you can find us on Twitter at obsidianathos. Where can we find you, Jesse?
I'm also on Twitter, just at Jesse Heinig. And what about you?
I'm at Radu76 on Twitter. I'm also at Radu76 at tabletop.social on Mastodon. And of course, the Dark Sun Discord and Facebook groups.
Send us your notes and your thoughts on this one. If you liked this, we might talk some more about dissecting other Dark Sun adventures.
Yeah, I definitely think we want to do that. I also really want to kind of go through like all the magazine adventures.
Oh yeah,
Those were I feel like a lot of people don't know about those because they're not like, you know, products you can buy. They're sort of hidden
right.
away in
Like
old
the one in
magazines.
Polyhedron
Right,
with the
exactly.
Sable
Yeah, there's a
Sandcrawlers.
bunch of them. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I definitely want to kind of get through that stuff in the future. But I think that's going to do it for us. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you so much.